The Vampire King called her temporary, so she disappeared with his unborn heir. The ancient castle stood tall against the red evening sky. It looked like a monument that would last forever. Inside its black stone halls, the Vampire King Kasimir Nightshade ruled the immortal world. He ruled with a hard hand that never showed mercy. That changed the night she walked through his doors. Serafina Mora was not supposed to be there. She was the daughter of a small vampire lord from the southern territories. Her father sent her as a peace offering. It was a diplomatic gift wrapped in silk and fake smiles. His province had fallen behind on their blood payments. Rather than face the king's anger, he offered something he thought was more valuable: his daughter's service to the crown. A temporary arrangement, Kasimir announced to his court. His silver eyes barely looked at the young woman standing before his throne. She will serve as royal companion until the debt is paid. Nothing more. The words cut through Serafina like sharp silver blades, but she kept her face calm and still. She had been trained since childhood to stay composed at court. Nothing, though, could have prepared her for the stunning beauty of the Vampire King himself. Kasimir was tall and strong. His hair was as black as a raven's wing. His face looked like it was carved from marble. But it was his eyes that stayed with her. Ancient, cold, and completely without warmth. Temporary, she whispered to herself that first night. She stood in the rich rooms that had been given to her. The word echoed in the big empty space. Around her neck hung a silver pendant her mother had given her before she died. It was the only warmth she had left. The first weeks were hard, even though everything around her was soft and fine. Kasimir hardly noticed she was there, except during formal court events. Then she had to stand beside his throne like a pretty statue. People introduced her as the temporary companion. They never acted as if she was more than a placeholder in his long life. But Serafina was not the kind of person to fade into the background. Unlike the other people at court who were afraid of the king, she began to challenge him. At first, it was quiet. Then she grew bolder. "Your Majesty seems very uninterested in the trade talks with the Western covens," she said one evening during a private dinner. These dinners had become normal, though Kasimir spent most of them reading papers while she sat in silence. He looked up, surprised she had spoken. "And what would you know of such matters?" "I know that Lord Brennan is stealing from the trade routes. I know that half the lost shipments are being sold on the black market in human cities. And I know that if you spent less time reminding everyone I am temporary, and more time watching your advisors, you might actually notice." The temperature in the room dropped. Kasimir's eyes flashed with danger. "You forget your place, girl." "My place?" Serafina stood up. Her own power began to shimmer around her like heat waves. She was not as old or as strong as he was, but she was no weakling. "My place is wherever I make it. You want me quiet and pretty, then you should have asked for a painting, not a person." For the first time since she arrived, Kasimir truly looked at her. What he saw made something long asleep stir in his chest. He saw a woman with copper-colored hair that fell like silk down her back. Her eyes were the color of amber, and held both intelligence and fire. She had a spine of pure steel, even though she stood in front of someone who could end her life with a single thought. "Investigate Lord Brennan," he said quietly. "Report your findings directly to me." It was a small win, but a win all the same. "As you wish, Your Majesty." From that night on, their relationship changed. Serafina became more than decoration. She became his confidant, his investigator, and his unexpected ally in a court full of snakes. She found corruption. She exposed traitors. She handled political problems that had been growing for centuries. And Kasimir began to need her presence in ways that scared him. He found himself listening for her footsteps in the halls. He sought her opinion on matters of state. He watched the way candlelight moved across her face during their longer and longer dinners. She made him laugh, something he had not done in 300 years. She challenged him. She frustrated him. She woke parts of his soul he thought had died long ago. "Tell me about your mother," he asked one night, surprising them both. Serafina's hand went to her pendant. "She was human," she said softly. "My father turned her because he loved her. That shocked the whole province. She died when I was young. The turning did not work properly. Some humans are not meant for immortality." "I am sorry," Kasimir said, and he meant it. "Are you?" Serafina's eyes met his. "You who called me temporary before you even learned my name. You who made it clear I am just a debt payment with an end date." The words hung between them like drawn swords. Kasimir stood up suddenly and walked to the window. He stared out at his kingdom. "It is easier that way," he said at last. "Everything is temporary when you are immortal. Everyone leaves eventually, to death, to betrayal, or simply to the slow wear of time. I learned, centuries ago, not to become attached." "That is not living," Serafina said, joining him at the window. "That is just existing." He turned to look down at her. For a moment his careful control slipped. She saw raw longing in his eyes, deep loneliness, and something else that made her breath catch. "Serafina," he whispered, her name on his lips for the first time. His hand reached up to cup her face. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with gentle care. The kiss, when it came, felt like the world tipping on its side. Centuries of cold isolation melted in the heat between them. Kasimir pulled her close with trembling hands. He kissed her like she was air and he had been drowning, like she was light and he had lived in darkness for too long. That night, everything changed. The temporary arrangement became something neither of them could name, but both of them needed desperately. They fell into each other like stars colliding, creating something new and bright and frighteningly fragile. For 3 months they lived in a bubble of stolen happiness. Kasimir would call her to his private rooms. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. He showed her secret passages in the castle. He shared stories from centuries past. He let her see the man behind the crown. She taught him to laugh again, to hope again, to feel again. But he never said the important words. He never called her anything but temporary. "The court is talking," his advisor Lord Thorne said one morning. "They say the temporary companion has stayed past her purpose. The debt is paid, your majesty. Perhaps it is time to send her back to her father's province." Kasimir felt something crack inside his chest, but his face stayed calm. "I will make the announcement soon." He did not see Serafina standing in the doorway. He did not see how her face went pale at his words. He did not notice when she quietly slipped away. That night he came to her rooms as usual. He expected their normal dinner, conversation, and the sweet comfort of her arms. But something was different. Serafina was distant. Her smiles were forced. Her touches were careful. "What troubles you?" he asked, drawing her close. "Am I still temporary?" The question was barely a whisper. Kasimir froze. In all their time together she had never asked him to define what they were. He had been grateful for that. He had hidden behind the unclear words like a shield. But now, looking into her eyes, he saw the vulnerability there, the hope, the desperate need for reassurance, and he panicked. "You have always been temporary," he said. The words came out harsher than he meant. "You know this. From the beginning this was never meant to be permanent. You are here until I decide otherwise." He felt her stiffen in his arms. He saw the light die in her eyes, but he could not stop himself. Fear made him cruel. "Did you think this was something more? Did you think the Vampire King would bind himself to a minor lord's daughter? You have been useful, Serafina, and pleasant company. But do not mistake convenience for anything deeper." The silence that followed was loud. Serafina carefully pulled herself from his embrace. Her face became a perfect courtly mask, the same mask she had worn that first night in his throne room. "Of course, your majesty," she said. Her voice was empty. How foolish of me to forget my place. Will that be all for this evening? Kasimir wanted to take it back. He wanted to pull her into his arms and confess that she had become as necessary to him as blood itself. But pride and fear kept him silent. He simply nodded and left. He told himself it was better this way, safer for them both. He did not go to her rooms the next night or the night after. He threw himself into the work of ruling. He avoided the parts of the castle where he might see her. When they crossed paths during court events, she was perfectly polite, perfectly professional, and perfectly distant. It was exactly what he had said he wanted. It was destroying him. 2 weeks later, during a council meeting, Serafina quietly collapsed. The castle physician came out of Serafina's rooms with a look that made Kasimir's ancient blood run cold. He had been pacing the hallway for hours, ever since she fainted during the council meeting and was carried away. The memory of her falling, of catching her unconscious body in his arms, played over and over in his mind. "Well?" Kasimir demanded. His carefully kept calm was cracking. "What is wrong with her?" Dr. Lysander, who had served the royal house for 2 centuries, looked at his king with something between sympathy and mild blame. "Nothing is wrong with her, your majesty. Lady Serafina is with child, approximately 6 weeks along." The world stopped. Kasimir stood frozen, unable to understand the words. A child. His child. It was supposed to be impossible. Vampire fertility was so rare it was almost mythical, a blessing given only once in several lifetimes. "That is," he started, then stopped. His mind raced. 6 weeks, the timing matched perfectly with their last night together, before he had pushed her away with cruel words and deliberate coldness. "Congratulations, your majesty," Dr. Lysander said, though his tone held an edge. "Though I must tell you, Lady Serafina asked me to keep this information private. I am breaking her trust by telling you, but I thought you should know. She plans to leave the castle tonight." "What?" The word came out as a growl. "She cannot leave. I forbid it." "The debt is paid, your majesty. You yourself have made it clear many times that her presence here is temporary. Legally, she has every right to return to her father's province." Dr. Lysander's eyes stayed steady. And perhaps, given the circumstances, it would be best for everyone if she did. Kasimir's hand shot out and gripped the physician's collar. "You forget yourself, doctor." "No, your majesty, I believe you have forgotten yourself." The old vampire's voice was quiet but firm. "That woman has served you faithfully. She uncovered plots against your throne. She brought light to these dark halls, and by all accounts she has fallen deeply in love with you, and you have treated her as disposable. Now she carries your heir, a miracle that has not happened in the royal bloodline for 5 centuries, and she is so sure of your rejection that she would rather run than tell you." The words hit like silver bullets. Kasimir released the doctor and stepped back as the full weight of his mistakes crashed down on him. Serafina was pregnant with his child. Instead of coming to him with joy, she was running away in secret. Because he had called her temporary. Because he had been too afraid to admit what she meant to him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I will not tell you that, your majesty. If you want to find her, you will have to do it yourself. And perhaps think about what you will say when you do, assuming she will even listen to you." Dr. Lysander bowed and left, leaving Kasimir alone in the corridor. Through the heavy door of Serafina's rooms, he could hear movement, the sounds of someone packing, preparing to leave forever. He should let her go. It would be safer for everyone. He was the vampire king with enemies in every shadow. Any woman beside him became a target. Any child became an heir that rival groups would try to eliminate. Serafina would be safer away from him, raising their child in the quiet of her father's small province. But the thought of never seeing her again, of their child growing up without knowing him, was more painful than anything he had endured in 5 centuries of life. Kasimir raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What could he say? How could he possibly explain or apologize? Words had never been his strength. Action was what he understood. He turned and walked away, but not to hide. He had preparations to make. Inside her rooms, Serafina folded another gown into her trunk with shaking hands. Tears streamed silently down her face, though she was too proud to sob out loud. One hand kept drifting to her still flat stomach, where an impossible miracle was growing. A child. She was carrying the Vampire King's child. When she first suspected, 3 days ago, she had felt a surge of joy so strong it almost hurt. She had imagined telling Kasimir. She pictured his face lighting up with wonder. Perhaps, she had thought, this would be the thing that finally broke through his walls, that made him see her as more than temporary. Then she had overheard him talking with Lord Thorn in the throne room. "The companion becomes troublesome, Your Majesty," Thorn had said. "She has too much influence in court now. Some are beginning to question why a temporary arrangement has lasted so long. It creates confusion about her status." "You are right," Kasimir had replied. "It is time to end this arrangement. I will send her back to her father's province within the fortnight. Find her a suitable husband there, someone appropriate to her station. It will quell any rumors and restore proper order to the court. Find her a suitable husband." The words had shattered something inside Serafina. She had stood there, one hand pressed against her stomach, and realized that Kasimir would never see her as anything but temporary. Even if she told him about the child, it would just become another duty for him to manage, another political problem to solve. She could not bear it. She could not bear to see the coldness in his eyes when she told him. She could not watch him arrange a marriage to another man while taking her child to raise as a royal heir. She could not be temporary for one more day. So she made her decision. Tonight she would leave. Her father's province would not welcome her back, not pregnant and unmarried. But she had money saved, jewelry she could sell, and her mother's sister lived in a humid city to the east, past the borders of vampire territory. She would go there, raise her child in peace, and try to forget the Vampire King who had stolen her heart and crushed it without even noticing. A knock at the door made her freeze. "Come in," she called, quickly wiping her eyes. Her handmaid Celeste entered, but she was not alone. Behind her came 3 more servants, all carrying things, furniture, tapestries, trunks of clothes, and boxes of books. "What is all this?" Serafina asked, confused. Celeste smiled knowingly. "His Majesty's orders, my lady. We are to pack everything in your chambers. All of it is to be moved immediately." Pain cut through Serafina's chest. So Kasimir was that eager to be rid of her. He could not even wait the fortnight. He was having her belongings removed tonight. "I see," she said quietly. "I will get out of your way then." "Oh no, my lady," Celeste said cheerfully. "You misunderstand. We are not packing these things to remove them from the castle. We are moving them to the king's private wing. His Majesty has ordered that your belongings be transferred to the Queen's chambers." The Queen's chambers. The words did not make sense. Those rooms had been empty for 300 years, ever since Kasimir's first wife had died in childbirth, along with their stillborn son. No one had lived in them since. They were sacred, forbidden, a monument to the king's grief. "There must be some mistake," Serafina whispered. "No mistake, my lady. His Majesty was very clear. Everything is to be moved tonight." Celeste's eyes were twinkling. "He is preparing the chambers himself. He will not let anyone else touch them. It is quite romantic, actually. We have not seen him like this in, well, ever, to be honest." Serafina's mind was spinning. This did not make sense. Just hours ago, Kasimir had been planning to send her away. Now he was moving her into the Queen's chambers. Unless, had Dr. Lysander told him about the baby? Anger flared hot and bright in her chest. Of course, the child. That was what this was about. Not her. Never her. Just the heir she carried. Kasimir was securing his bloodline, making sure the baby's place was legal. She would be moved to the Queen's chambers like a prized broodmare. given a title and position for the sake of the child, but still fundamentally temporary, still not chosen for herself. "Stop," she said firmly. "Stop packing. I do not want any of this moved." Celeste looked shocked. "But my lady, the king commanded." "I do not care what he commanded. Those are my belongings, and I say they stay here. Better yet, pack them in my traveling trunks. I am leaving the castle tonight." "Leaving?" A deep voice came from the doorway. "I am afraid I cannot allow that." Serafina spun around. Kasimir stood there, her breath caught despite her anger. He looked different, vulnerable. His usually perfect appearance was messy. His dark hair looked as if he had been running his hands through it. His expression was raw and uncertain. "You cannot allow it," she repeated, her voice sharp. "You do not own me, your majesty. The debt is paid. I am free to go wherever I wish." "You are right," he said quietly, dismissing the servants with a gesture. They fled quickly, leaving Serafina and Kasimir alone. "I do not own you. I never did. But I am asking, begging you to stay." "Why? Because of the child?" She placed a protective hand over her stomach. "Dr. Lysander told you, didn't he? That is what this is about. You need an heir, and suddenly I am worth keeping around." Kasimir flinched as if she had struck him. "He did tell me about the baby, yes, and I will not lie. Knowing you carry my child fills me with a joy I did not think possible. But that is not why I am asking you to stay. That is not why I had your things moved to the Queen's chambers." "Then why?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "So you can keep your temporary companion in a prettier cage? Give me a fancy title while still holding me at arm's length? I cannot do it, Kasimir. I cannot be temporary anymore. It is killing me." He crossed the room in 3 strides, and fell to his knees before her. The Vampire King, the most powerful immortal in existence, on his knees with tears shining in his ancient eyes. "You were never temporary," he said, his voice breaking. "Not from the moment you first challenged me, first made me laugh, first made me feel something other than emptiness. I called you temporary because I was terrified. Because everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me. And I thought if I did not name what we had, if I did not claim you as mine, then maybe fate would not notice. Maybe I could keep you safe by keeping you at a distance." His hands came up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "But I was wrong, so catastrophically wrong. By trying to protect you, I hurt you. By refusing to claim you publicly, I made you feel disposable. And now you are running away because I was too much of a coward to say 3 simple words." "What words?" Serafina whispered, afraid to hope. "I love you." The words came out fierce and certain. "I love you, Serafina Mora. I love your strength and your intelligence and your courage. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see through my masks, the way you have brought light back into my darkness. You are not temporary. You could never be temporary. You are my mate, my queen, my eternity, if you will have me." Serafina was sobbing now. Years of loneliness and weeks of heartbreak poured out of her. "You hurt me," she said. "You made me feel like nothing. I know, God help me, I know, and I will spend the rest of our immortal lives making it up to you. I am sorry, my love. I am so desperately sorry." "And the baby?" she asked. "Is that what changed your mind?" "The baby made me act today instead of wasting more time being afraid. But my mind changed weeks ago. The first night I slept without you beside me, and realized I would rather face every danger in existence than spend another day without you." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you. Baby or no baby, I love you. I choose you, not as temporary, not as convenient, but as mine, forever." She pulled back to look into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception or duty, but all she saw was raw, honest love, terrifying in its intensity, beautiful in its truth. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have loved you for so long it hurts." The kiss was different from any they had shared before. It was not passion or heat or desperate need. It was a promise, a claiming, a forever sealed in the meeting of their lips. When they finally broke apart, Kasimir stood, pulling her up with him. "Will you stay?" he asked. "Will you take your place as my queen, my partner, my equal? Will you let me love you the way you deserve, loudly and publicly, and for all eternity?" Serafina smiled through her tears. "Yes, on one condition." "Anything." "Never call me temporary again." "Never," he swore. "You are permanent. You are forever. You are mine as I am yours." He swept her into his arms and carried her toward the door. "Where are we going?" she laughed. "To the Queen's chambers. Your chambers now. I have spent the last 3 hours preparing them, and I intend to spend the next 3 days showing you exactly how permanent you are to me." As they passed through the castle halls, servants and courtiers stopped and stared. The vampire king was carrying Serafina openly, tenderly, his face transformed by joy. By the time they reached the queen's chambers, word had already spread throughout the castle. The temporary companion was temporary no more. 3 months later the castle was transformed. Where once cold stone and shadows had ruled, now there was warmth and laughter. Serafina's presence as queen had brought changes that rippled through every part of court life. Diplomatic relations with neighboring provinces improved. Corruption was rooted out with careful thoroughness. The staff walked the halls with lighter steps. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. Lord Thorn stood in the shadows of the council chamber, watching as Kasimir and Serafina worked side by side, reviewing trade agreements. The king's hand rested protectively on his queen's growing belly. She was nearly 5 months along now. The pregnancy was finally beginning to show. "It is disgusting," muttered Lady Ravenna, joining Thorn in the shadows. The mighty vampire king, reduced to a lovesick fool. And for what? A minor noble's daughter who got lucky enough to seduce him. Thorn's eyes never left the couple. "She is more dangerous than that. The girl has influence now, real influence. She has convinced him to implement reforms, to change laws that have stood for centuries. She is making him weak." "And the child?" Ravenna asked quietly. "Will be the final nail in the coffin of his strength. Once the heir is born, his attention will be even more divided. He will be vulnerable." A slow smile spread across Ravenna's beautiful face. "Then perhaps we should ensure that the child is never born." Thorn turned to look at her fully. Lady Ravenna was ancient, nearly as old as Kasimir himself, and had been a fixture at court for 2 centuries. She had also been one of many who had tried for the position of queen over the years, only to be rejected. "What are you suggesting?" Thorn asked carefully. "I am suggesting that accidents happen, even in the most secure castles. A fall down the stairs, poison in her evening meal. So many tragic possibilities." Ravenna's voice was silk over steel. "And with the queen gone, things could return to how they were, with Kasimir properly guided by his advisors, not distracted by a pretty face." "You are talking about murdering the queen," Thorn said flatly. "That is treason. That is death. Only if we are caught." "You have been his advisor for 300 years, Thorn. Do not tell me you have not noticed how he has changed. He questions your counsel now. He seeks her opinion instead. How long before you are replaced entirely?" The words struck at Thorn's deepest fear. He had built his entire existence around being indispensable to Kasimir. But since Serafina's arrival, he had felt his influence waning, his advice dismissed, his position threatened. "I want no part in harming her directly," he said finally. "But perhaps, if certain security measures were to be overlooked, if certain guards were reassigned at crucial moments, if information about the Queen's routines were to become available to interested parties." Ravenna smiled. "That is all I ask. Leave the rest to me." Neither of them noticed the small figure that slipped away from the keyhole, racing through the servant passages with urgent news. Celeste burst into the Queen's private study, where Serafina was reviewing requests for audience. "My lady, you must hear this. I was cleaning near the council chamber. And I heard Lord Thorn and Lady Ravenna plotting. Serafina looked up sharply. Plotting what? Against you, my lady, against the baby. Lady Ravenna spoke of accidents, of poison. They want you dead. The quill snapped in Serafina's hand. She stood carefully, her mind already racing through possibilities. You are certain of what you heard? Every word, my lady. Lord Thorn agreed to help by weakening your security. My lady, you must tell the king immediately. Serafina moved to the window, one hand on her belly, where the baby was starting to kick regularly now. She should tell Kasimir. Of course she should. But something held her back. If she ran to him with this, what would happen? He would be furious. He would likely execute Thorn and Ravenna on the spot. But they were just the visible threat. How many others in the court resented her rise from temporary companion to queen? How many more plots would emerge from the shadows if she appeared weak, in need of the king's constant protection? No, she needed to handle this herself. She needed to prove that she was strong enough to be queen, not just in title, but in truth. Celeste, I need you to do something for me, Serafina said quietly, and you must tell no one, not the king, not anyone. The handmaid nodded nervously. Anything, my lady. I need you to let Lady Ravenna think her plan is working. Tell the other servants that I will be walking in the East Gardens tomorrow at sunset. Alone, as I often do. Make sure word reaches Ravenna somehow. But my lady. Trust me, Serafina said firmly. I am not the helpless girl who arrived here 8 months ago. I have learned from the best. The next day Serafina prepared carefully. Hidden beneath her flowing gown was a silver blade, blessed and sharp. She wore her mother's pendant as always, but today she had added protective charms woven into her hair by a witch she had befriended in the nearby human town. Most importantly, she had arranged for Kasimir to be occupied with an emergency council session about border disputes. A convenient crisis she had created to keep him busy at exactly the right time. As sunset approached, Serafina made her way to the East Gardens alone. The gardens were beautiful at this hour, all crimson roses and lengthening shadows. They were also isolated, far from the main castle, with multiple exits and plenty of places for an ambush. Perfect. She walked slowly along the paths, one hand resting on her belly, appearing lost in thought. But every sense was on high alert, tracking the subtle sounds of movement in the bushes, the whisper of fabric against stone. My queen, a voice called out. Lady Ravenna emerged from behind a statue, her smile sharp as broken glass. How lovely to find you here, walking alone at such a late hour. Is that wise in your condition? Lady Ravenna, Serafina acknowledged coolly. I find the evening air helps with the pregnancy. Is there something I can do for you? Actually, there is. Ravenna moved closer, and Serafina saw 2 more figures emerge from the shadows. Lord Brennan, whom she had exposed for corruption months ago, and Lord Victor, who had been passed over for a position that Serafina had recommended go to someone more competent. You have made quite a few enemies, little queen, Ravenna continued. Did you think there would be no consequences for your meddling? For your presumption and thinking you could waltz into this court and change everything? I think, Serafina said calmly, that changing things that needed changing is exactly what a queen should do. The fact that you disagree says more about you than about me. Victor laughed harshly. Bold words for someone surrounded and outmatched. You are what, barely a century old? Against the 3 of us, you would not last a minute. That is where you are wrong, a new voice said, and Dr. Lysander stepped out from behind a different statue. She is not alone. From other positions around the garden emerged more figures. The captain of the Queen's Guard, whom Serafina had personally promoted, the ambassador from the Western Covens, who owed Serafina a life debt, and several other allies she had cultivated during her months as queen. Ravenna's face went pale. What is this? This is a trap, Serafina said softly. Did you think I would not know about your plotting, that I would not prepare? I have been playing the political game since before I could walk, Lady Ravenna. You threatened my child. Your second was assuming I was weak. The king will hear about this, Brennan blustered. The king, said Kasimir's cold voice from the garden entrance, already knows. Everyone froze as the vampire king stepped into the garden, his face a mask of controlled fury. Behind him came Lord Thorn in chains, already looking broken. Kasimir crossed to Serafina's side, his hand immediately going to her waist. Are you all right, the baby? We are both fine, she assured him. I had everything under control. I know you did. His eyes swept over the assembled conspirators. My queen sent me a note 1 hour ago, explaining everything, including the trap she had set. She asked me to stay away, to let her handle it herself. I compromised. I stayed back, but I watched, and I saw everything. He turned his terrible gaze on Ravenna and her co-conspirators. You plotted to murder my wife and unborn child. You conspired to commit treason against your queen. And Lord Thorn, you whom I trusted for 3 centuries, you enabled it all. Your Majesty, please, Thorn began, but Kasimir silenced him with a gesture. Save your pleas. You will face the blood court for your crimes, all of you. He nodded to the guards who had entered behind him. Take them to the dungeons. Their trial will be held tomorrow night. As the conspirators were dragged away, Ravenna screaming threats and promises of revenge, Kasimir turned back to Serafina. For a moment, his composure cracked, and she saw the fear underneath. You took a terrible risk, he said quietly. I had to. They needed to see that I am not just your wife, but a queen in my own right. That threatening me has consequences. You could have been hurt. The baby is fine. I am fine. And now the court knows that the queen is not to be trifled with. She took his hand and placed it on her belly, where the baby was kicking vigorously. Our child will be born into a stronger kingdom because of tonight. Kasimir pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. You terrify me, he whispered. Your courage, your strength, you make me feel things I swore I would never feel again. Fear, vulnerability, the desperate need to protect something that I could actually lose. You will not lose me, Serafina promised. We are forever, remember? You claimed me, I claimed you. Not even death could take that away. Death, Kasimir said darkly, will not get the chance. After tonight I am doubling your guard, restricting access to your chambers, and personally vetting everyone who comes within 20 feet of you. Serafina pulled back to look at him. You will do no such thing. I will not be made a prisoner in my own castle. Serafina, no, we will make reasonable security improvements, yes. But I will not hide. I will not let fear rule us. We are building something here, Kasimir. A better court, a better kingdom. That requires me to be visible, to be accessible, to be strong. He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a sound of pure, exasperated love. How did I ever think I could keep you as a temporary arrangement? You are the most permanent thing in my existence. You have taken over my entire life. Good, she said, kissing him softly. That was always the plan. That night, after the conspirators had been locked away and the court had been informed of the attempted coup, Kasimir held Serafina in their chambers, his hand splayed across her growing belly. I received a message from your father today, he said quietly. Serafina stiffened. She had not spoken to her father since the day he sent her to the castle to pay his debts. What did he want? To congratulate me on my marriage and upcoming heir, to suggest that now that his daughter is queen, perhaps his province deserves special trade considerations and tax exemptions. Anger flared hot in Serafina's chest. He sent me here like a payment, called it a temporary assignment, and now he wants to profit from it. That is what I thought you would say. Kasimir's smile was sharp. Which is why I have already said my response. I informed him that you are queen by your own merit, not his, that his debts were paid in full, and he gets nothing more, and that if he ever tries to use you for political gain again, I will personally ensure his province becomes a historical footnote." Serafina turned in his arms to kiss him properly. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour. I was beginning to worry." She laughed, the sound filling their chambers with warmth. Outside, the castle settled into night, safer now, stronger now, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Because the Vampire King had found his queen, and together they were unbreakable. The first pains came during a diplomatic dinner with the Eastern Covens. Serafina was in the middle of negotiating a trade agreement when her hand froze mid-gesture. Her face went pale. Kasimir, who had spent the last month watching her like a hawk, noticed immediately. "Serafina?" "It is time," she whispered, another contraction stealing her breath. "The baby is coming." The room erupted into chaos. Kasimir swept his queen into his arms, shouting orders as he raced toward their chambers. Dr. Lysander had been on standby for weeks and was already there when they arrived, along with the midwife and a team of carefully vetted medical staff. "You need to leave, Your Majesty," Dr. Lysander said firmly, as they settled Serafina onto the bed. "Absolutely not." Kasimir's grip on Serafina's hand was unbreakable. "I am staying." "Kasimir," Serafina gasped between contractions. "He is right. You should." "I am not leaving you. Not for this. Not for anything." His eyes met hers, and she saw the terror there. He was remembering his first wife, who had died in this very room, in this very bed, bringing his first child into the world. "I am not her," Serafina said firmly, understanding. "I am not leaving you. I am strong. The baby is strong, and we are both going to be fine." "Promise me," he demanded, his voice breaking. "We are forever. Remember?" The labor was long and difficult. Vampire births were rare for a reason. The child's developing supernatural strength made the process dangerous for the mother. Hour after hour, Serafina fought. Kasimir never left her side, his ancient heart breaking with every cry of pain she could not suppress. "I cannot," she gasped after the 10th hour. "Kasimir, I cannot do this." "Yes, you can." He pressed his forehead to hers, pouring his strength into her. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You faced down a court full of enemies. You survived assassination attempts. You brought a 500-year-old vampire to his knees. You can do this." "Tell me again," she whispered. "I love you. I love you more than my own existence. You are my eternity, my queen, my everything. And I am right here. I am not going anywhere." With a final tremendous effort, Serafina pushed. Suddenly the room was filled with a new sound, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. "A daughter," the midwife announced, tears streaming down her face. "Your Majesties, you have a beautiful daughter." Dr. Lysander worked quickly, ensuring both mother and child were stable, before placing the tiny bundle in Serafina's arms. Kasimir stared down at his daughter with an expression of absolute wonder. She was perfect, tiny and fierce, with her mother's copper-colored hair already showing in wisps on her head, and her father's silver eyes looking up at them, with supernatural awareness, unusual in a newborn. "Hello, little one," Serafina whispered, exhausted but radiant. "We have been waiting for you." "She needs a name," Kasimir said, one finger gently stroking his daughter's impossibly soft cheek. "Something strong. Something that means she is ours, that she is permanent." "Evangeline," Serafina said softly. "It means bearer of good news, because she is the promise of our future, proof that love is stronger than fear." "Evangeline Nightshade," Kasimir tested the name. "Our daughter, our heir, our miracle." He looked at Serafina, tears shining in his eyes for the second time in their relationship. "Thank you, for her, for everything, for giving me a reason to live instead of just exist. You have given me back my soul." "We gave each other everything," Serafina corrected. That is how this works. That is what forever means. The castle celebrated for 3 days straight when the birth was announced. An heir to the throne, a healthy mother, a king transformed by love. It was the beginning of a new era. But not everyone was celebrating. In the dungeons below, awaiting execution for her crimes, Lady Ravenna received a secret visitor in the dead of night. "I can offer you a choice," the cloaked figure said, voice distorted by magic. "Death at dawn, or a chance at revenge." Ravenna looked up, interest kindling in her eyes, despite her dire circumstances. "I am listening. The Queen has made enemies beyond these castle walls, powerful enemies, who see her influence over the Vampire King as a threat to the old ways. They are willing to offer you resources, allies, a chance to strike back at those who imprisoned you. In exchange for what? The child. Steal the heir, and all crimes against you will be forgiven. You will be given your own province to rule, wealth beyond measure. All we need is the baby." Ravenna's smile was vicious. "Tell your masters they have a deal." The cloaked figure melted back into shadows, and Ravenna began to plan. 3 weeks later, Serafina woke in the middle of the night to an empty cradle. The window to the nursery was open, curtains blowing in the night wind, and her daughter was gone. Her scream brought Kasimir running, brought guards flooding into the room, brought the entire castle into emergency lockdown. But it was too late. Someone had taken Evangeline. "Find her," Kasimir roared, his power shaking the castle foundations. "Tear apart the kingdom if you have to, but find my daughter." Serafina stood frozen, staring at the empty cradle, her mind threatening to shatter. Then training kicked in, the same iron composure that had gotten her through her mother's death, through months of being called temporary, through assassination attempts and political intrigue. "The window," she said, her voice deadly calm. They went out the window, which means they had to go down the east wall. There are only 3 paths from there that do not lead through guarded checkpoints. She moved to the map on the nursery wall, the one she had studied 100 times while planning the room's security. The river, the old servants' passage, or the crypt entrance. The river is too loud. The baby would have cried and alerted guards. The servants' passage has been sealed for renovations. That leaves the crypt. Kasimir was already moving. The crypts connect to the old tunnel system under the castle. They emerge 5 miles away in the forest. "Then that is where we go. Now." They raced through the castle, gathering a strike force as they went. Kasimir was a force of pure fury, his vampiric speed blurring reality as he moved. But it was Serafina who led them through the crypts, her analytical mind tracking the subtle signs. A disturbed cobweb here, a fresh scuff mark there. "They have maybe a 30-minute head start," she said, moving deeper into the darkness. "We can catch them." They emerged from the tunnels into the forest to find a group of vampires waiting with weapons drawn. And in the center, holding baby Evangeline, was Lady Ravenna. "Looking for something?" Ravenna taunted, the baby crying in her arms. "Take 1 step closer, and I will snap her neck." "You will die before you can complete the motion," Kasimir said, his voice arctic. "Put down my daughter, now." "I do not think so. This child is my ticket to—" She never finished the sentence. Serafina moved with speed that shocked everyone present, closing the distance and slamming into Ravenna with devastating force. The impact knocked the baby free, and Kasimir caught Evangeline with supernatural precision, cradling her close as Serafina and Ravenna went down in a tangle of fury. "You threatened my child," Serafina hissed, her hands around Ravenna's throat. "You have made the last mistake of your existence." Ravenna tried to fight back, but Serafina was fighting with a mother's rage. Within seconds it was over. Ravenna lay broken and defeated. Serafina stood over her, breathing hard. "The rest of you have a choice," Kasimir said, addressing Ravenna's allies, while still holding his crying daughter. "Surrender now, and face trial, or fight and face me. Choose quickly." They chose surrender. Smart vampires knew better than to face the Vampire King when his family had been threatened. On the journey back to the castle, with Evangeline safely in her mother's arms and the conspirators in chains, Serafina finally allowed herself to shake with reaction. "I almost lost her," she whispered. "I almost lost our daughter. But you did not. You saved her. You tracked her. You fought for her. You got her back." Kasimir wrapped his arms around both his girls. "You are an extraordinary mother, an extraordinary queen, and an extraordinary woman, and I fall more in love with you every single day." "I was so scared," she admitted. "So was I, but we faced it together. That is what we do. We face everything together." Back at the castle, they discovered the scope of the conspiracy. Ravenna had been working with a coalition of vampire lords who resented Kasimir's new policies and Serafina's influence. The plan had been to take Evangeline, raise her away from her parents, and use her as a puppet ruler when she came of age. "They are afraid," Serafina realized, reading through the captured documents. "All of this, the assassination attempts, the kidnapping, it is because they are afraid of the changes we are making, afraid of losing their power." "Then they should be afraid," Kasimir said coldly, "because after tonight, everyone will know what happens to those who threaten my family." The trials were swift and the justice absolute. Ravenna and her co-conspirators were executed at dawn. The vampire lords who had funded the plot were stripped of their titles and exiled. And Kasimir made a declaration that echoed through every vampire territory in existence. "The Queen and the heir are under my personal protection. Any threat against them will be considered an act of war against me personally. There will be no mercy, no second chances, no forgiveness. My family is sacrosanct, and anyone who forgets that will learn exactly why I have held this throne for 500 years. The message was received, the threats stopped, and the family began to heal. Years passed, decades, then centuries. Evangeline grew into a formidable young woman, equal parts her mother's intelligence and her father's strength. More children followed, twin sons with Serafina's copper hair and fierce loyalty to each other, and a youngest daughter who inherited her father's silver eyes and her mother's gift for diplomacy. The castle that had once been cold and empty became filled with life and laughter. Kasimir, who had thought himself too broken for love, became the most devoted husband and father in vampire history. Serafina, who had arrived as a temporary arrangement, became the greatest queen the immortal realm had ever known. "Do you remember that first night?" Kasimir asked one evening, centuries later, as they watched the sunset from their private balcony, "when I called you temporary?" "I remember," Serafina said, leaning into his embrace. "I also remember wanting to stake you for it." He laughed, the sound still as wonderful as the first time she had drawn it from him. "I was such a fool." "Yes, you were. But you learned." She turned in his arms to face him. "We both learned. We learned that love is worth the risk, that family is worth fighting for, that forever is something you choose every day." "I choose you," Kasimir said, as he had every day for the past 300 years. "Today, and always, I choose you." "And I choose you," Serafina replied, kissing him softly. "My king, my love, my eternity." In the distance they could hear their children laughing, training with the guards, living the safe and happy lives that Kasimir and Serafina had fought so hard to build. The kingdom was prosperous, the court was stable, and the future stretched before them like an endless gift. The Vampire King had called her temporary, but she had stayed, and taught him the meaning of forever, and they lived it together, one chosen day at a time, for all the ages to come. This story shows us something important about real life. When people are afraid of being hurt, they sometimes push away the ones they care about most. Kasimir did that because he had lost people before. Serafina almost left because she felt unwanted. Both of them learned that hiding feelings and calling someone temporary only causes more pain. True strength is telling the truth about how you feel, even when it is scary. True love means choosing someone every day, not because it is easy, but because they matter. And when a family faces danger together with honesty and courage, they become stronger. These lessons about communication, trust, and choosing love over fear can help anyone build healthier relationships in the real world. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe so you don't miss my next video.